Hey everybody, great to have you back here in the fish tank. It's that time again, our monthly look at the Minion Masters Meta. Now, if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to keep up to date with everything Minion Masters related. And just to bring you up to date with what this sort of process is that we do here. So on sort of an hourly basis, I record the leaderboards in the game. So that's solos, pre-mates, randoms, and draft. And then we pop all that into a big spreadsheet. And then we figure out, looking at that, what are, based on the leaderboards, the best cards, the best decks, and the best masters. Now, as always, we'll go through a lot of data. So if you need to pause the video, screenshot it, whatever, make sure you do that. And if you stick to the end, I'll give you a really big top tip that'll help you get the best information out of this data set. Right, we got a lot to get through. Let's dive in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the master popularity. So for version 2.17, which ends tomorrow, if you're watching this today, I think the new patch is dropping on the 19th, Saturday the 19th. Okay, so we have a graph here for each of the masters. Yellow is 1v1, red 2v2 randoms, and 2v2 pre-mates is blue. And we can see straight away here the biggest bar is Morelia. So overall, Morelia is the most played master based on the leaderboard. Looks like second place is Milloween, and third place is Stormbringer. And also, why not look at the other side of it? Wrecked is the lowest. But how does that compare to last season? Well, let's have a little looky here. So we'll switch to pie charts. So left pie chart is last season, 2.16, and the right pie chart is this season, 2.17. And we can see that Morelia, as we saw just now, is still the master of choice. In fact, Morelia's gone up. Morelia's had the biggest overall increase of all of the masters. So first last season with 13%, over 16% this season. Very versatile master. Don't have to play her with an accursed deck. And of course, she does have that ult perk if you want to try that out. So last season, Morelia, Stormbringer, Diona. And this season, Morelia, Milloween in the light blue, Stormbringer in the orange. And in fourth place, we have Apep there in the sort of the darker blue. So Morelia went up quite a lot, so did Apep and Valorian, and Diona did drop off quite a lot. Remember, Diona did get a nerf, but not in this patch, in the last patch. Volko dropped off, and Tronvir. So that's the Masters overall, but let's drill down a little bit and have a look at the specific game modes. So let's switch to 1v1, so solos. Last season, Diona was #1 by a long way. The orange there on the left, nearly 18%. And you can see on the right, Diona's dropped down to 5th place at just under 11%. So Valorian, the green, is the #1 choice in solos this season. Volko 2nd, Apep 3rd, Milloween 4th. Valorian has seen the biggest increase from last season. You can see the green from last season was 5th or 6th or something, up to 1st this season. Apep's gone up a lot. Morelia's gone up a lot. Diona dropped off massively. King Puff dropped off a little bit. And Milloween also dropping off. Average mana cost didn't really change, went down 0.1 of an average mana, but not really changed. And of course, if you're new to the game, if you're building a deck, you want to kind of look between sort of 3.5 to 4.5 mana. That's an average mana cost for your deck. But of course, mana curve, stuff like that is important as well. Right, so Valorian, the #1 choice in solos, but let's have a look how that compares to randoms. So randoms last season, Morelia in the yellow, Milloween 2nd, King Puff 3rd. This season, it's still Morelia, and it's even more Morelia. I noticed at various occasions when I was towards the top of the randoms leaderboard, the top 4 players were playing Morelia. Right, so Morelia, still #1. Milloween, still #2. King Puff has dropped off. Mordor is #3. So if we look at the changes between the seasons, Milloween went up the most. Stormbringer also went up a little bit. King Puff dropped off quite a lot, which I'm kind of surprised about because he did get that change, that buff to his ult perk, the Mimic Magic. But I feel like that's a very niche perk where it really depends on what your opponent's playing as to what sort of value you can get out of it. So King Puff dropped off quite a lot. Setsu dropped off quite a lot. Tronvir also dropped off quite a lot. And again, the average mana cost didn't really change, 3.8 up to 3.2. 9. Right, so Morelia, the master of choice in randoms for this season. Now, how does things change with pre-mades? Now, pre-mades last season, Stormbringer, Morelia, Mordor. This season, Stormbringer, Morelia, Mordor. Yep, not too much has changed there. Morelia still second, but has eaten up quite a lot of that pie, up from 11% to 17%. So still second, but more second, if that makes any sense. So the top 3 is still the same. As mentioned, Morelia went up quite a lot, so did Setsu. King Puff also went up a little bit. But what dropped off? Volko dropped off, Diona dropped off, Ratbo dropped off. And one of the new things the devs have done this season is they've given us end of season stats for win rates and play rates for cards. That's not the data set that we use for this video, but it's definitely something to keep into consideration. And I did have a little look at it, and I'll show you a link to it a bit later. But one thing that really stood out is in pre-mades. So King Puff's down there at 8.1%, 5th overall. But if we look at the win rate data, and remember, something to clarify is the win rate data is for, I think, all matches above Platinum, including and above Platinum, whereas this is just leaderboard data. But the win rate data showed that King Puff had a 71% win rate, which is massively, massively OP, according to that data. Not a massive play rate, but a massive win rate. So King Puff with the highest win rate down in 5th, and Stormbringer up in 1st, with only a 48% win rate. So that's definitely something that we can maybe look at a later date. Right, so those are the master popularities. Average mana cost went down a little bit, just to finish off there with pre-mades 4.1. And then the last thing we're going to look at is master popularity for draft. Of course, draft is a little different. You can't just choose whatever you want. You build your deck from the options given to you, but still, Morelia comes out on top. Tronville was second last season, Diona's second this season, Valorian third last season. Valorian's really dropped off. So Morelia, the master of choice here, closely followed by Diona in draft. Setsu saw a lot more play, as did Apep. Valorian dropped off a lot, as did Tronville. And again, the average mana cost is pretty much the same across all the game modes. Right, so master popularity done. Let's move on to rarity composition. Lot on this charts here. We're not really going to look at this much, but just to remind ourselves, there are 4 rarities in the game: common, rare, supreme, and legendary. Minion Masters is not a pay-to-win game. You don't need a deck full of legendaries. You can see here that most decks are mostly comprised of common and rare, with a sprinkle of supreme and legendaries in. That is your takeaway. Next, faction composition. There are 9 factions in Minion Masters. This just shows which are the most played factions. It's kind of a bit misleading because not all factions have the same amount of cards, but, you know, I guess we could normalize the data at some later point, but let's just have a look at the play rate here. So overall factions, last season Voidborn, Accursed, Scrat. This season Accursed has gone up, Voidborn dropped down, Scrat's still there. Accursed has gone up to first and has a bigger play rate than it had before. It's gone up most out of everyone. Outlander and Empyrean have dropped off. And if you want to get into the deeper data, you can look at the faction stuff here in the different ranked modes. But we're not going to go over that because we've already got enough to go over, and some stuff's way more interesting than that. Right, wildcards. Reminder, wildcards are only available in randoms. So we just have our completely green pie charts here to remind ourselves. In solos, no pie charts. Sorry, no wildcards. In pre-mates, no wildcards. In randoms, there are wildcards. So nearly 70% not wildcarding. Nearly 10% one wildcard. Nearly 20% 2 wildcards. Remember, wildcards are duplicates, allowing you to play up to 3 copies of 1 card or 2 copies of 2 cards. And they are slowly being phased out of the game. I think it's a lot healthier with it. But we can see that less people wildcarding this season compared to last season. Good job. But what are the most wildcarded cards? So, right, this is going to be a common format for the slides as we go through. So let me just quickly outline how it works. So let's have a look at the Walk-in Blind Date. It has a colour border. That border is green, which tells us its rank has gone up. If it's red, the rank has gone down. If it's white, it's a new card, which you don't currently have. And if it's black, it's the same rank as last season. It also has 2 numbers. The top left number is its current rank, so Walking Blind Day is first. Its top right number is its rank last season, which was 5th. Right, so if you understand that, you'll understand most of the rest of the slide. So Walking Blind Day is the most wildcarded card, followed by Feng the Wanderer, which has gone up massively from 33rd place to 2nd place. Blast Monster stays up in 3rd. Burrow Witch Wolf gone up from 8th to 4th. Shockrock gone up from 9th to 5th. So Walking Blind Day did have the biggest overall increase. Feng the Wanderer as well. Chain Gang saw some increase as well. But what dropped off? Arcane Ring dropped off a lot. They may have removed the wildcards from that, which would probably explain that. Blind Day also, I think that might have happened. Priestess as well. Remember last season we had Priestess who wasn't able to be wildcarded, but she was bugged at the start and she was massively wildcarded. So even though she was only wildcardable for a few days, she was still in the overall stats. Right, so those are the wildcards. Now, let's look at the top cards. So if you're thinking about building a deck, you want to put some good cards in it, and this is going to certainly help you. Right, so same format as before. So the overall top card is Skeleton Crew. It's such a basic card. It's so boring, but it's the #1 included card. And it was last season as well. Heelpuff, again, such a basic card. Still there in 2nd place from last season. Blast Monster getting a lot more play, gone up from 9th to 3rd. Swarmers, again, super basic card. In 4th, down a little bit from 3rd. So if you're looking to include some good cards in your deck, this is a great place to start. Now, Scrat Horde went up quite a bit. You can see there it's in 10th place, up from 69th. It did get a buff in the last patch where you get 10 of them now instead of 8. Blast Monster did see a big increase in its play rate. But what went down? Spire Stag dropped off a lot. It did get nerfed. Protocol Assassin got reworked and kind of destroyed. That dropped off a lot. Shroomer got nerfed. That also dropped off a lot. And just to go back to the rarities, these top 27 cards here, guess how many of them are legendary? None. None of them are legendary. 14 commons, 8 rares, 5 supremes. And as always, every single card in the game, all 295 of them, appeared on the leaderboard at some point during the season. I think that's insane. You'd think some of them would just be terrible and not get used, but everyone did. But of course, there is one card that stands out as being worse than all the others. There was one card that was used less than all the others. What was it? Pause the video, look for the pinned comment asking you the question, see if you can guess which was the least used card. Right, let's carry on. So we're going to split now into non-spells and spells. If you're building a deck, you probably think about, let me think about my minions and buildings, and then separately let me think about my spells. So we're going to do that here. So here we've got a bit of a breakdown of the 3 ranked modes, solos, randoms and pre-mades, and these are the top non-spells. So non-spells, we're talking about minions, we're talking about buildings. Defenso up there in solos, really strong, up from 12th to 1st. Scrat Horde again gone up to 6th from 67th, partially off the back of that buff for sure. But so many simple cards here. Heelpuff, simple card. Swarmer, simple card. Scrat Horde, simple card. Slitherbound, simple card. Lone Scout, simple card, but strong. Don't think you need all these legendaries in your deck to compete. Basic cards are very strong. And that's one of the things we love about Minion Masters. Right, randoms, Skeleton Crew. In both randoms and pre-mades, #1, Blast Monster. Up in 2nd, where it was last season in randoms, up in 2nd from 16th in pre-mades. And again, we see some common cards across the board. Right, so overall top cards, Skeleton Crew, Heelpuff 2nd, Blast Monster 3rd, Swarmers and Cleaver. Some of those cards have been in the game almost from conception. Many, many years ago, still going strong. Okay, let's look at the counterpart of that slide, the spells. Right, top solo spell, Arcane Barrage. Remember, that gets stronger every time you use it, so you generally find that in cheaper decks. Chain Lightning, still in second place, despite getting a bit of a nerf in the last patch where it does only 50 tower damage instead of 100. Scrutillery dropping off from first place down to third. And then if we have a look there in randoms, Arcane Ring, really popular. Unholy Ground, still up there in second. Bridge Buddies got up from 10th to third. And of course, when we look at the spells for randoms and pre-mates, the 2v2 modes compared to the solo modes, we tend to find more of the heavy removal spells, like the Beam of Doom, for example, Magma Storm, stuff like that, in the pre-mates and the randoms compared to the solos, because, you know, there's just more chance of getting the value there. Right, so Chain Lightning is the #1 choice in pre-mates, Beam of Doom second, Shock Rock third. Now, overall, #1 spell, Chain Lightning. You can see it's in all three there. Second in solos, 6th in randoms, and 1st in pre-mates. Second was Bridge Buddies, Unholy Ground 3rd, Avalanche 4th, and Harmful Souls 5th. Right, next up we're going to look at the Legendaries. As mentioned before, Legendaries aren't the be-all and end-all, but they are cool. They do have a lot of special abilities, and you can build decks around them. When it comes to Minion Masters, Legendary doesn't necessarily mean strong, it just means more unique. And if you're desperate to craft some Legendaries, then these are going to be some great ones to go for. So in solos, we've got Morgul the Swarmer King as the top Legendary. Scotty the Sensitive Savage was top last season, dropped down to second. Jinglong dropped down to third from second. And interestingly, we're seeing Dragon's Nest in there. It's a very niche card that you have to build your deck around, but it's still having a strong showing there in solos. And then if we switch to randoms, we see more minions that are good at dealing with multiple things, like the Rekinator, for example. Ankahesh is great at dealing with big units. Same with things like Zip Zappinator and the Revenant. So if you're looking to grab some Legendaries, these are going to be some good ones. Some of these are going to be really generic that you can kind of put in any deck. Some of these are going to be really specific, like the Dragon's Nest, that you need to build around. Now, overall, and Jackier's mind is going to explode here, the Veil Stalker was the most played Legendary. Second was Morgul, third Jinglong, Ankahesh Desert's Doom in fourth, and the Razor Squadron in fifth. So, great place here to look at some Legendaries that if you want to craft. Now, let's have a look at Draft. Now, as we mentioned before, Draft is the game mode where you build a deck based on the choices given to you. You get a choice of 3 masters, you get a choice. Each card you get 3 choices. So you don't have full choice like in Constructed, but with enough data, we should get, you know, some trends. We should see some trends, but they do definitely change from one season to the next. Right, Frostfeather's #1 non-spell draft card. Up from 28th last season. Crystal Archers, the second choice, up from 6th. Shielded Crossbow Dudes, the third, up from 39th. Assassin, still the 4th choice. So some really changing, some really not. But if you're new to Draft, this will give you sort of a good cheat sheet to refer to when you're building your deck. But of course, you can't just choose the cards based on this. You need to consider, you know, synergies with other cards, synergies with your master. What does your deck need? And one thing I always like to do is compare cards, their rank position compared to their draft position, because there's some cards that are used way more in draft than ranked. For example, this season the cards played more in draft compared to their ranked. Lightning Bolt, don't see that very often in ranked because people build decks to deal with Lightning Bolt, whereas in draft people don't have that luxury. So Lightning Bolt had the biggest sort of difference between draft and ranked. Rocket Scrap, Fire Imp, Storm Tamer and Slithering Summons were the top 5. And then the other top 5, which is those that are played less in draft compared to their rank: Bannerman, Arcane Ring, Boomer, Zap Shrine, and ATG Drone. Right, we're just going to close out the draft section here by looking at the draft spells. Infiltration, #1 draft spell this season, was 54th last season. This season, it's first, come out of nowhere. Chain Lightning, second, was 4th. Scrutillery, third, was first. And then we see Lightning Bolt, not a card you're going to see on very high up on the leaderboards in constructed modes, but draft, it's the 4th choice. So always interesting to see that. Right, so let's have a think. We've done the Masters and we've done the cards. What can we combine them into? I've got it. Decks. Let's have a look at the top decks. Now, the top decks, the way that we do it is I look at the spreadsheet and I order it by the position the deck is, and then we have a look at the cards within the deck and their rank, and we look at we rank them, we get their average. The lowest average is the best. We put all those together and that gives us our best decks. Now I am working on maybe a better way of deciding on what are the best decks, but that might be something we do next season, not this season. Right, so this is the top deck based on that criteria for each master. So solos, top deck here, Valorian, super cheap, but it does have that big rocking roller as a removal spell. And of course you get the golem with it. Often, depending on what you're playing against, you might never get to play that rocking roller, but it's kind of like a get out of jail free card. Spire Stag's very strong. It did get a nerf, but it still has that knockback, which can be really important at pushing things off the bridge and just getting you some more of that XP. Right, second place we have Diona. Again, cheap Diona at the low end, and then we have some power at the top end with the Jezra, for example, ATG drone, Harmful Souls as the removal spell. That's likely to get changed in the next patch, but it's interesting to see that being used outside of an accursed. Right, King Puff. Remember, you want a decent amount of horde in King Puff to try to trigger those night puffs at perk 3. And one thing to mention here is we can't really tell what perks are being used by these decks. We can only assume that some of the perks are much stronger than others. Again, in the win rate data set that we spoke about earlier, that does have that data in, and I'll show you at the end of the video how to find that, actually, if I remember. Right, so there's the King Puff. Then we have a Morelia deck, non-accursed Morelia. APEP, pretty cheap cycle APEP. And then we have a Volko deck, taking advantage of the rage. It's going to split the Shroomummer. Spirit Infusion as well to give you more splits. Now we have Milloween with spells, as you would expect. Call to Arms, and we've got the Magma Cannon to be the building that gives the Call to Arms value. Next up we have pretty aggro Ravager deck. Then we have Wrecked, again, cheap at the low end. Pretty cheap overall, to be honest. And of course, because it's kind of a cheap cycle deck, you get the Arcane Barrage spell, which you want to use as often as possible. And you get that real power at the late game. Right, next up we have Mordor, probably using the normal Mordor perk. There's not any really bad revives in this. So it's just going to be trying to put the buffs on the Priestess, on the big units, getting the Rage, getting the heals, getting the Spirits. Just kind of a big push deck. Right, closing out the top 1v1 decks, we have a Ratbow deck. Again, cheap. We get the Scrat Horde in there. We've seen a lot of that. Poison Strike for the removal and Jezra as the top end. Stormbringer. We see some range minions in there to get the buff. And the Tass as the big removal. Tronvir. Again, nothing kind of out of the ordinary. Cheap bridge grab, then some DPS and some annoyance. And then Setsu there. Unfortunately, the lowest of those decks. Looks like it's going to be the Setsu using the normal perks since we have a smattering of spells. Right, let's move on to the top 2v2 randoms decks. So the top deck based on our criteria was this Milloween deck. So cheap bridge control, cheap removal, and again we see this Call to Arms. This time it's the Ghost Turret giving you the building to trigger that on. And then it has the Cleaver at the top end, which, as we saw, was a very heavily played card and still very, very strong. Right, next up we have Morelia, and you can see a lot of these top decks playing the heal path. Really powerful healing, really cheap bridge grab, and lots of other stuff that you can do with it. Valorian, here we have a Demon Warrior Valorian deck. So we have the Demon Warrior plus the Arcane Barrage, which is effectively the Demon Warrior of the spell world. Very cheap cycle. Magma Storm to deal with big clumps of stuff, and Anka Hesh to help deal with big units. Next up, we have a King Puff deck. Reasonable Horde. Well, I don't know, a little low on the Horde really there to get the Night Puffs, but very powerful top end. Future Past Apep, so no Future Present, but Future Past, which is the 3 mana version of it. And of course, it's fairly cheap because you want that to be cyclable. Right. Next up for our randoms decks, and a reminder, if you see these little tabs like above the Stormy, that's indication of a wild card. Next up we have a Mordar deck, a Zenshi Mordar, again probably using the standard Mordar perk. Tronvir, cheap low end, powerful top end, pretty standard stuff. Setsu, do we have some spells? We certainly do have some spells. Diona. And then we have a Ratbow deck, and then closing out the randoms decks, Stormbringer with some range minions, so it's definitely going to be using the standard perk. Wrecked, cheap, and then power, something we're seeing quite common there. And again, Arcane Barrage being the spell of choice. Zenshi Ravager, including the Jungle Jumble. And finally, we have Volko. So again, power top end cards that are going to be really difficult to deal with that rage. Propellers Horde, like to see that in Volko because you're definitely going to have something with rage to trigger those, and then some cheap bridge control and Horde. There. Right, and then finally for the decks, we're going to look at the pre-mades. Reminder with the pre-mades, these decks may or may not be built with a specific friendly deck in mind. So the top deck here, we have Morelia, and we start seeing Arcane Bolt a lot for some reason. But yeah, as always, cheap bridge control and then some powerful units to deal with clearing Horde like the Whirly Scrat, clearing single target things like the Cleaver and the Divine Warrior just to tank a lot of damage. Similar sort of thing here for Tronvir, and similar sort of thing here for King Puff, and similar sort of thing here for Ratbow. So you can see we've just got this cheap low end to give you Horde, to give you bridge control, and then the power end to deal with more powerful things. Then we get to Stormbringer, where we see a lot of the ranged units to get that marksmanship. Next up we have Apep, similar sort of thing. Priestess, we're seeing a lot more of her. Mordar, now this Mordar might be using the ult perk because there are a lot of bad revives here in the Mordar. If you play it sensibly, then you could get away with it, because you do have some top end good revives, but low end there's lots of bad revives. Valorian, again, cheap low end, powerful top end, which is going to be something we're just going to keep saying, I think. Setsu, again, Setsu with some spells here. Not cheap spells though, so she won't be able to cycle that perk 3 as often as maybe you'd like. Could be using the ult perk. And then we have Miloween again, bunch of spells, bunch of tanky units. And then closing out the decks, we have Diona, again, cheap low end. We've got some spells in here. Remember, Diona's traps gives her the extra sort of control tools. And then we have Jezza the Void Mother and the Rockin' Roller. Volko, interesting Volko here. Snipers, don't see that too often. Harbinger as well. Something that a lot of newer players struggle to deal with, the Harbinger. Experienced players, not so much. And the Revenant, which can be very powerful. I would like to see, if the Revenant needs a buff, I would like to see it be made slower, because once it gets onto your tower, although it's going to chunk away your HP, health is a resource, and it's easy to deal with. But once you're trying to deal with it with minions, it can be really problematic. Next up we have Ravager, and finally we have a Wreck deck. Again, future past, but no future present. Right. That's the main bulk of the stuff that I wanted to go through. What we're going to go through next, very quickly, and if you've made it this far, well done, is we're just going to go through some extra data, but we're going to go through it really quickly. So I'm not going to talk about it, but if you want to pause the video, you can do to find out more about it. This video doesn't need to be an hour long. Right. So next up, we're going to look at the top cards, and we're going to break it down a little bit. So this is for solos, top cards, top non-spells, top spells, and top legendaries. And we could do that for each of the modes just very quickly here. So top cards in randoms, top non-spells in randoms, top spells in randoms, top legendaries in randoms, and then the same for pre-mates, top cards, top non-cards, non-spells, sorry, not non-cards, top spells, and top legendaries. And then very quickly here, if you're very interested about a specific master, we're going to go over the top cards to look at for that master. So for example, here we're starting in solos for APEP. Reminder, check the number of decks at the bottom of the slide. That does tell you how many decks were used to generate this data source to give you an idea of how representative it is. Right, so very quickly, APEP in solos, randoms, pre-mades. And next up we have Diona in solos, randoms, pre-mades. Next up we have King Puff in solos, randoms, pre-mades. You know where this is going. Milloween in solos, randoms, pre-mades. Mordor in solos, Mordor in randoms, Mordor in pre-mades. Morelia in solos, randoms, pre-mades. Wrecked, solos, randoms, pre-mades. Ratbo in solos, Ratbo in randoms, Ratbo in pre-mades. And then we have Ravager in solos, randoms, pre-mades. Setsu in solos, Setsu in randoms, Setsu in pre-mades. Stormbringer in solos, randoms, pre-mades. Tronvir in solos, randoms, pre-mades. Valorian in solos, nearly there, randoms, pre-mades. And finally Volko in randoms, sorry, solos, randoms, and pre-mades. Okay, we are almost through it. Hopefully you found that useful. And of course, if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. But before you go, there's just something else I want to show you, which is a new thing. I've been thinking about doing it for a while, and hopefully this can help you out with it. But you may or may not know that I have a website, badasafish80.com, and I've decided that we're going to put a lot of this information on the website. So let's have a quick look at that now. So if you go to badasafish80.com, the homepage gives you all this latest news. So as I spoke about earlier, the updated stats are there. You can click on it, is this here, and it'll take you to the spreadsheet. But what I want to talk to you specifically about is this new meta thing. We've gone through the meta in the video, but if you want to look at the slides in more detail, guess what? You can go to my website and find them there. So Minion Masters Meta 2.17. It still has the old video because this video is currently in the process of being made. We're making it right now, so we don't have it on there, but it'll be on there soon. But if you go down past the video, you can see we've got all the slides. So these are all the slides that we've seen to make this video. So hopefully that should be really useful. Just click on them. Boom. You've got the data there. And then maybe I'll put some of the older ones on there so we have some reference. Going forward, we'll put the new ones on there. So we can always look back, and hopefully you guys will find that useful. Whew, right. I think that's it. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for getting through it. Hopefully this was useful. Let me know in the comments. Reminder, look out for the pinned comment to guess which is the least played card overall. Always interesting to see what people's guesses are. Some of them are amazing. Some people get them like that. Some of them, it feels like they're playing a different game with their guesses. But it's all part of the fun. Anyway, I'll see you again soon here. My name's Bad as a Fish, and this is An Awkward Wave.